on today's StoryBeat.
For me, storytelling is asking a question with the reader. And I create a situation where the reader is willing to see themselves. You start perceiving which parts of you this person could be, and it's a way of letting you backstage in a story. And I would like the reader to want to come in, to be curious and look at the house, and maybe the house is a little untidy, and they perceive, what is this about?
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, Rosanna Staffa, is an Italian-born playwright and author. Her debut novel, The War Ends at 4, is a beautifully rendered tale about an Italian acupuncturist in Minneapolis who returns home to Milan and rediscovers all that she left behind, who she is, and what her life is really about. I've read The War Ends at 4 and found it to be a moving and poignant personal story about a woman trying to find herself. I highly recommend it to you. Rosanna's work has been featured in Gargoyle Magazine, the Brevity Nonfiction Blog, the Sun Magazine, the Examined Life Journal, and JuxtaProse. Her essay, Holy, is a prize winner in the TSR Review and nominated for the 2022 Notable in Best American Essays. Other writing of Rosanna's can be found in the Best Small Fictions Anthology 2021. She received an honorable mention for the Tiferet Journal's 2019 writing contest. She's also a short story finalist for the Masters Review Anthology, the 47th New Millennium Writing Awards, and a Pushcart Prize nominee. Rosanna's plays, which have been seen on stages in Tokyo, New York, Seattle, and other cities, include The Biggest Little House and The Innocence of Ghosts, which was staged off-Broadway in New York and filmed for the inclusion in the Lincoln Center Theater on Film Library. Rosanna also happens to be a licensed acupuncturist from the California Acupuncture College in LA and the Zhejiang College of Acupuncture in Hangzhou, China. So for all those reasons and many more, it's my great honor to welcome the brilliant writer, Rosanna Staffa, to StoryBeat today. Rosanna, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
The pleasure and the privilege is mine, believe me. So let's go back to the beginning a little bit. When did you first become interested in storytelling? When did that first strike you?
Well, I was very young. I was very little. And I lived, my family moved around a lot. So I was from Naples. I arrived in a small town in the Venetian district. It was a magnificent town, but I felt very lonely. And, in Italy, there are different dialects in different regions that are like a language. So I had to listen. I learned to listen, which is not a bad thing as a writer. But I was a little bit lonely, and the winters were long. And I was given a journal. I was very young, and I said, what would I do with my days? And what would I write in this journal? Nothing is happening. I tried to think if there was an attack, a police, nothing. And then I was so frustrated. And I wrote in his journal, I want to go to Padua. I'm going to catch the bus by myself and go to see the big, windows. And then, writing it, I was on the bus. And I started to describe the smell. And I was seeing the windows. And at that moment, I went, wow, writing was a little bit magic.
It's a lot of magic.
Yeah, but I was a kid and I went, oh, wow, look at these.
Were you always a reader as a kid?
Yeah, I was. And, as a child, there were always books around the house and I read them all. And some took me, some didn't. But it was fascinating. It was like another territory, I remember, with Kafka was a spider on a ceiling. And I mean, as a child, you identify completely. You don't even pull back.
As a child, your imagination is wide open.
Completely. And I actually would encourage people to have kids read very early, not just children's books. I read books that were not children's books.
Hmm. Well, some parents, I think, are afraid of it, aren't they?
Well, I don't know why. I didn't see anything that ever upset me. I only saw the pleasure of it, and I was in the company of other people. The writers were people, were friends, were people I could converse with.
You converse with them in your head.
Yes.
And when did you start to get interested in the theater? Because you're also a very fine playwright.
Well, thank you. Well, what happened is that when I arrived to America, my English was not very good. I mean, my British English, my written English was excellent. But then having a conversation or understanding was very different. So I think the dialogue came to me in a more natural way. And also, I was in New York, and the subway was magnificent. That there was all these interrupted conversations. I was sitting in this subway, and this woman was saying about Joe, and Joe was terrible, and this other woman was weeping. But I was very taken by Joe, and I wanted them to say a little more, and I really missed my stop to know a little more. And I said, there is a lot of subtext in conversation.
So did you go to the theater a lot?
Yes, I went to the theater a lot. And I actually married a theater director. So
Oh, is that right?
I had to.
You had to. Did you then realize that writing dialogue was really your strong suit at that time?
Did it. I interpreted things that way. It came to me more natural. And I was in a workshop at the Mark Taper Forum where I studied with Maria Irene Fornes, who was magnificent. I actually wrote a short story about that. Other magnificent writers. And it was organized by Oscar Eustis, who now is in New York. And so he organized this, and it was magnificent. And we were all doing these exchanges, and I learned so much from Maria Irene Fornes, mentors.
So then you just started to write plays just to write plays?
Yeah.
You didn't go to school for it somewhere?
No, that was the school, the mentors, and we exchanged work and,
And there's nothing wrong with having mentors and just doing it. It's one of those things. The theater and movies and so on do not really require a formal education, but it's good to learn something from people that have been there before.
Yes, these mentors were amazing, I'm telling you. I mean, Maria Irene Fornes, first of all, made us stand up and do yoga every now and then. That's enough now with all this scribbling. She wanted to keep our minds alert and always surprised us with something. She told us the monologues can be deadly because then you get into the zzz and you fall in love with your words. I've forgotten that.
What I believe William Faulkner once called, you've got to be able to kill your darlings.
Oh, yeah. We all do it. We have to.
Well, you do. You have to be brutal as an editor of your own work.
Yeah, but I suspect, if I may say, that we also get attached to those parts because they're safe.
That's a very good way to look at it, which is not good. It's not good for it to be safe. It needs to be a little bit on the edge, a little dangerous.
Once you're safe, what are we doing?
The point of art, I think, is to challenge people's thinking.
Absolutely. Especially your own. Keep you on your toes. In fact, I also write short stories. I wrote a novel. I write short stories. I even wrote a poem recently. But I think it's like juggling to keep my mind centered on writing, but not too eased into it. Keep going. Keep it going.
Do you have a preference? Do you prefer writing plays or novels or short stories, or do you just like it all the same?
I have a real liking for short stories.
Short stories.
They are so rigorous, and I have to create a world and create it fast and keep it exactly and precisely the way it is. And as short as they are, they cannot disappoint, which is a very important thing. But now, of course, I got passionate about writing a novel, so of course I'm writing another one. You know how it is.
Of course. Well, once you've written one, you're probably going to write more. That's the likelihood. But there's no question for me, and you're sort of voicing it, that writing short stories is the most challenging kind of writing there is.
Well,
I think.
Again, poetry, rumor has it, but I would go insane. I mean, I did write a poem, but it was a prose poem. And short stories, I don't know.
They're hard. They're difficult.
Yes. They have the motorcycle, but they have to be perfect or they crash.
That's absolutely right. Are there kinds of stories that you tend to gravitate toward?
No, but sometimes they come to be. There was one story that I absolutely didn't want to write, and it was so stubborn that I had to.
It was so stubborn. What does that mean? Does that mean it just wouldn't let you alone?
It wouldn't leave me alone. And I would say, I don't want to write this. It was about my terrible grandmother. I don't have a sweet, gentle grandmother.
Are there kinds of stories that you avoid?
No, I don't think so. I don't go too over personal. I'm starting to be a little strange about essays. I mean, I do write them, and the story about the grandmother was an essay, but I should say that for me it's a little strange to make this distinction between essays and short stories, because in Italy they don't exist. It's a narrative.
Any narrative is a narrative.
Because the writer always writes about themselves. I mean, a story I write is different from a story you write. Let's face it. A writer is always interpreting, what is going on in a particular way that is part of their lives. So I actually took a class to understand what was an essay. Because it was so mysterious.
I thought The War Ends at 4 felt very personal to me.
Well, it is. It has very strong references to my life, but the authenticity is in the emotions.
Well, I think that's what I meant. Personal, it felt very emotional and like it was happening to Renata, your protagonist. It felt like it was her story, and you really felt what she was feeling.
Oh, thank you. That was my joy, to make a reader come in and feel with the protagonist, not feel for the protagonist, but with, will be for me the greatest pleasure.
I'm just curious, how many languages do you speak, even a little bit?
Speak. I speak English and Italian, but I could do some Spanish. I could get away with some Spanish and some French. And once upon a time, I knew German, but now I don't know it. And I was in love with Russian. Can you believe I forgot it? I studied Russian because I wanted to know exactly the sounds that were in the head of Chekhov.
Oh,
my favorite writer.
Your favorite writer is Anton Chekhov. You don't speak any Chinese from having lived in?
Oh, yeah. Well, but medical terms and a little bit. And what was amazing for me about the language was, that there is no word for goodbye in Chinese.
There's no word for goodbye? I did not know that.
It's zhazhang.
Zhazhang?
I say it with the accent of Anjo. Zhazhang means see you again.
Huh. I did not know that.
I loved it.
So I asked that specific question of you because obviously you're not from America, but you speak excellent English. And so the question that I have is, how important do you think it is for a writer to be able to think and speak other languages?
I think it is very important because it makes you flexible inherently. You just feel that it's not so stern, so firm. You can play with things.
You're seeing things from different perspectives, having another language.
Yeah, like Italian, it's very soft. All the words start and end with a vowel. So there is a melancholia. And of course, that's why it's the language of, opera, because you start, full of our. For me, English is so fascinating, full of consonants and gerunds and that. It's jazz. It's pure jazz. And having loved jazz, it's just insane. It's a gorgeous language, and it can be clipped, and it does so many things.
It's a melting pot of language.
It is. It is. That's true.
And even though it comes from, Mother England and there's British and so on, American English is filled with all kinds of melting pot languages and references to other languages.
I love that. I absolutely love that.
So I think you're excellent with setting tone. Tone is not an easy thing to do in a story, I think. And you're very good at setting a tone.
Oh,
Can you define for you what story tone is and how you achieve it?
For me, storytelling is asking a question with the reader. I want to ask questions that I ask myself. And we are in there together. And I create a situation where the reader is willing to see themselves. They also see themselves as an outsider. It doesn't matter that she's Italian and a woman and whatever. You start perceiving which parts of you this person could be. And it's a way of letting you, I would say, backstage, to use a theater term, backstage in a story, in someone's private thoughts. And I would like the reader to want to come in. It's like welcoming them home. I wish they don't stay in the hallway, taking their shoes off and stuff. I wanted to be curious and look at the house, and then maybe the house is a little untidy. And they perceive, what is this about? What is this home like?
Storytelling tends to be about conflict and friction, tension, and people want to see other characters in conflict and dealing with how they get in and out of those situations. And so to me, that's what makes storytelling so exciting. What for you makes a good story good?
Well, exactly that, actually. A particular personality with their little quirks, that I'm fascinated by quirks, like they don't like this, their little fears that are challenged to confront something that they wouldn't normally confront unless it happened. And that's for me the perfect conflict, the conflict I love.
I was always trained that is what makes a character, when they're put into that challenging situation and how do they respond to it. That's what makes character.
Exactly. And it's so charming. He starts being very precise because suddenly the character acquires clarity by what they refuse to do, they're afraid to do, would like to do, they become absolutely defined.
I think that's exactly right. That's how we define them, is by what a character does or does not do.
Yeah, perfect. Yes.
So let's talk about The War Ends at Four. Tell the listeners what it's about. Pitch the story to us.
Well, the story follows Renata, an Italian woman living in Milan, who's from the south but lives in Milan. She's married, and unfortunately, this is an actor who's as fascinating on stage as he is off stage. So this creates a conflict. And in this moment in her life, she's questioning her choice, we all do. And her clinic, small acupuncture clinic, she came to America driven by the passion to study acupuncture. This idea that there is this energy under our skin is fascinating for her, as a healing possibility that they even in the universe. But she has to question this clinic. She's not doing very well because she's very generous with her customers. And she's called to Milan by an emergency. Her father is very ill, so she leaves abruptly. And once she arrives in Milan, she meets old stories. And the old stories as a force. And war comes back and old loves come back and new things arrive in her life that she has to make decisions. Will she go back or not?
That's the big question.
Yeah, what is home? And I wanted to say, and I hope I said it, that home is not just nostalgia. Home can be a place where you belong, where you discover that you belong. I mean, nostalgia is marvelous and we all have it for this and that, but maybe we created a nest where we belong, and that is home for.
Well, the old adage, of course, is you can't go home again. But in fact, she does go home and finds out it is a little different than what she was expecting or remembers. And she has to deal with that.
Yeah. And the novel is also, I wanted to go home. I had not gone on in a while. And the novel is full of smells and the taste of fog and this, because I wanted to go home, not now, but the home that I knew. I wanted to take the readers with me, but I wanted to go. Honestly, I wanted to go home. I love the fog, and I wanted to share that and all these things that people figure out home is. It's like if I go now, it's a little different because it's like I left the conversation mid-sentence. When you're at the table and everybody's laughing and this and that, and then you go make a phone call, you return the conversation, they change, and you have changed. I wanted to go back.
So you are an acupuncturist.
Yeah.
And Renata in the book is also an acupuncturist. And your name is Rosanna.
Yes.
And her name is Renata.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering how much she's based on you.
Well, a lot of her is based on me, very much. The name Renata actually comes from a writer I love, Renata Adler, and I met her and she told me she lived in Milan. So I went, well, I'll bring you to Milan. It was a very, very sweet encounter once upon a time.
When you started writing this book, which is going to be a little different than writing a short story because you're going to be in for a much longer haul, where do you begin? Where does your process begin? Is it developing characters or is it plot or where do you start?
It's character. For me, plot is character, is driven by character. If she's shy, well, that's a little different. And also, I wanted to say that being a layered person with conflicts doesn't mean you're not strong. People who make decisions like this, they're not necessarily strong. Maybe they are weak, actually. They can't allow questions to breathe with them. So I wanted her to let questions breathe. If you let them breathe and you don't rush to conclusions, I believe that they acquire a clarity. So that's what I did. I was a little restless with her and the plot, but you have to trust the character at a certain point.
Do you prescribe to the notion that the characters begin to speak to you?
Well, yeah. I wish they would speak more, but the thing is this, I can say that I don't know if this answers your question, that at a certain point, I'm not sure what the character would do or say. I still have to follow a certain plot, but I know what they would not say and they would not do. And the characters speak to me sometimes by resisting. And I have learned by resisting what I want them to do.
By resisting what you want them to do, you've got a thought in your head. I think I want the character to go in this place or that thing.
Wouldn't that mean marvelous? She encounter X, Y, and Z, and they fall in love. No, the character resists. And I have learned actually from being an acupuncturist that when you resist understanding a syndrome, you just pull back. And look attentively and let them speak more and let them come to you. So when the character resists so much, I get upset, of course, terribly upset. But then I think, have I lost maybe the core, the drive? why? Maybe I have them do something that is not attuned to what I had in mind. I got plot, you get plot anxious,
Well, because you may not know exactly where you're going, but the characters sometimes do. They don't always know, but it's very important that the audience doesn't know where you're going.
Oh, yeah. And in fact, my favorite stories are the ones that are very beautifully written and everything is clear. But there is this elusive undertext, emotion, where I go, and what now? And in fact, I don't know you, but the books that I reread are the ones that have that magic, where not everything is explained, but there are intuitions and a sense of emotional fullness.
There's nothing better than having the reader fill in all sorts of imaginative things for you.
Oh, yes. It's a dream. That's a dream.
So explain for the listeners what the big differences are, aside from length, what the big differences are in writing a novel versus writing a short story.
I don't think that there are such big differences. Maybe the rhythm, there is an accelerated rhythm in the writing a short story. It can still be a bicycle ride and you look around, but the energy has to be really, really strong.
In a short story, it's an intense burst.
Yes.
And in a novel, you can kind of lay it out over a longer period.
It's like music. There is a kind of music. There are changes and a different pace and this, but you can ease into it. And a short story has to keep you nervous, frankly,
It's got to keep you on the edge of your seat really fast.
Mm-hmm. You have to come in and go, oh my God, I'm in.
Are you a big researcher? Do you like to research things? Like I'm sure you went to Milan before you started to write the book, didn't you?
No.
No, you didn't go.
That's why I wrote it. I wanted to go back, but I did look at
I see.
I did look at photos.
Mm-hmm.
I look at photos. I look at maps. I stay with them, stay with photos a lot and let them speak to me. And I look at paintings. Yeah, that's my kind. Emotionally, I have to reconnect.
Is that your form of research, is to go look at photos and to absorb imagery and
Yes.
get back into your head sights, sounds, smells, etc.?
Yes, I would think so.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say is the most challenging part of that? Is it gathering the pictures so that you have what you need to really get yourself into that mind frame? Or is it the development of the story after that? What's the biggest challenge for you?
I think the connection, the developing after that, is this full picture interesting right now, or does it have a staying power, an energy, that will disturb me, not only feed me, but disturb me and reassess things that I was thinking.
You need the characters to disturb you in some way. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I don't want to ease into it. I want to be surprised.
You need the characters to not be what you're expecting when you start.
Well, I mean, they develop hopefully with the harmony and they make sense, but I don't want to, weigh them down by over describing. And I want to let them free, like in life, to be a little surprising.
Yeah, for sure. And the book does that.
Oh, thank you.
You don't know where you're going. I didn't know where it would end up for sure. So how long did it take you to write The War Ends at 4?
Well, I started and stopped a few years.
A few years.
Yeah. And then at the end, boom, I was centered on it.
Did you work from an outline or did you just go?
No outline. I knew what I wanted to do, the characters, and I made them move towards each other. So that's why it took so long. I should change, but never mind.
Well, I think you're doing what many writers do, so I don't know that you need to change at all. How do you figure out which characters to put in the story? Is it something that you think about for a long time and the characters come to you, or do you sit down and work at them?
I think is a middle of the road. Sometimes there is a character and I'm interested, and I have a little moment with this character. It's like having a coffee. And then I go, do I want to
Yes.
have lunch? I'm not sure. This is a character that has the staying power for lunch.
That's a wonderful way to put it.
Thank you. I didn't know if I made any sense.
You made a great deal of sense. That was a very, very good metaphor for what the process is like. Do you have a particular method for thinking through the structure of your story? Or again, are you just going? Do you know what the structure is before you start?
It's like building a trip, a journey. But sometimes you get not so strict. Sometimes you go, actually, I don't want to stop here. Maybe I'll go that way. But I want the reader to feel that this is a journey, but I have the map. The writer has the map. I don't want the reader to feel disoriented.
Well, there was never a moment when I read it, there was never a moment where I didn't feel like you knew what you were doing.
Oh, thank you.
It felt like you were very much in control of the story. And so that notion of this is just meandering or something, no. It felt like you had worked it out, which is why I wondered whether you worked the structure out ahead of time or it just came to you as you went.
Well, I start working on it. After I have the characters, I start having a sense of where they could go, what could happen. So a structure starts forming.
Can you tell as you're going that the story is working? Can you feel that as you're working through it?
Yeah. And I can feel when it doesn't. And then I go, wait a minute, what happened here? It's like playing music. If it's off or on.
So when it's off, what do you do? Do you back away from it for a little while?
I ask questions. I back away for a second. I have a little fling with a short story.
A little fling with a short story. So you actually get away from it. You take a break.
Yeah.
And that gives you what? A little artistic perspective?
Yeah. Then I go back. I'm a little more objective. I don't have all this dust going, oh my God, it's fallen on me. I don't know what to do. It gives a little clarity.
It gives it clarity. And for you, clarity, obviously, you've brought it up a few times, is really important. I know there are writers that clarity is not so important, but for you, clarity is.
Oh, yes, it is.
It's very important to me, by the way. I find I don't like books and movies that are unclear. I like clarity, I like structure, and I like all those things.
Yeah, I feel when I read something or see a movie that doesn't have clarity, I feel like being teased.
Teased?
Yeah. Someone teased me into this story or into this movie, and then, never mind. And you say, what do you mean, never mind?
I get very upset when there's no resolution. We don't know what the outcome is.
Yeah.
I need that.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the things that a novelist like yourself must do in order to attract a publisher? What are the things that novice novelists don't do that frequently keep them from finding a publisher? Do you know what those things are?
I look at my work with a certain objectivity, once it's finished, of course, and I read. I go to bookstores, I make comparisons, I look for an affinity in novels that either in theme or in language, in the way they express themselves. Actually, I found my publisher, my excellent indie publisher, Regal House Publishing, because I read novels by writers, and I looked who published them. It was Regal House. I said, well, how about I try them? And they did accept but I suggest this, literary citizen, read, have workshops, converse with other writers, so that you get a sense of yourself and them. And then you find if they are different, it doesn't matter if they write like thrillers. We are writing. We all want to write. We all want to communicate the story. Just be a literary citizen. Go to readings. Talk to bookstores. It's fabulous. They'll tell you. You say, what could I read? They'll give it to you.
Do you belong to writers' groups where you read each other's work?
Well, I have finished this novel at the Loft. We were in a one-year project, so I had to, and I was working with other writers, and now we stay together. We meet every now and then online and exchange work if we want to, or just talk about what's going on. But that's very, very, very important, I believe, to find a community. And again, it doesn't matter. They could be writing whatever.
Writing is writing is writing.
And don't buy this thing of the lonely writer. You're alone when you write, but then you have a community. Go for it.
And it's very important that you go out and find that community, isn't it?
Absolutely. I would recommend it to everybody.
I recommend it too.
It's just so important to acknowledge that we're in this world of writers.
Well, when people talk about the lonely writer, when you are writing, as you say, you're in a room by yourself. You're not in a room with a lot of people. So sometimes you can get a little bit lost for the world. So it's good to get out into the world.
Yes. Yes. Have workshops with people you respect.
Well, that's for sure. I think The War at Four would actually make an excellent movie. Is anything like that in the future?
I would love that to be in the future. It would be fantastic.
But there's nothing in the works at the moment, is there?
Not at the moment. No.
Maybe there will, because I think it would make a really good movie. And guess what? I think that it's the kind of story that would attract really good actors and actresses, especially Renata will attract a very, very fine actress.
Thank you. It's wonderful.
So let's talk about playwriting for a little bit, because this is another part of your entire being. So tell us about your plays. What is it about playwriting, aside from what you already told us earlier about the notion of dialogue? But the theater is more than just dialogue. It's not a movie and it's not a novel. What excites you about theater?
Well, I'll tell you what, that the audience is absolutely part of the experience. You think you're just sitting there. You are not. I have seen my plays twice in a row, sometimes, completely different.
Oh, totally. Each audience is totally different.
Yeah. This line that made people laugh?
Nothing.
No. And that's the magic. It's so unique. Theater is made by everybody having this experience. And that's why I hope it'll never die. Fantastic.
I don't think it's ever going to die. It's been around for, what, 2,700, 3,000 years?
The Greeks.
The Greeks. And people have often said that it's, on its deathbed. It's not going away. We need it. That's why humans need it.
Absolutely. I read that clapping originated to disperse the enchantment.
To disperse the enchantment. I've never heard that before. That's fascinating. So what then? We talked about the differences between writing a novel and a short story. Aside from the fact that a novel has a lot of prose in it and description, what are the differences in coming up with a story for a play versus a story for a novel or a short story?
I don't see much of a difference.
No difference.
No. I see characters. I see a drive. I see irrational moments. The only thing in theater, you go from outside in, and with books, you go from inside out.
Well, certainly one of the real differences, this is an undeniable difference, and that is that a novel, you can go inside of a character's thoughts without those thoughts being expressed to anyone else. But on a play, a character must express their thoughts or show it to us in some physical form. Otherwise, we don't know what's going on inside of a character's head.
Absolutely. And in a book, you can take your time. You can open it and close it.
Yes, indeed.
In theater, you stay with the experience.
And it's contiguous. It plays straight through. Like you say, you can't really stop, although we have these funny things in musical theater in particular, and a certain amount of Shakespeare and older plays called an intermission.
Yes.
And we do actually stop.
Yes, but not arbitrarily you stop.
Right.
Like when you're reading a novel, you can say, oh, no, I have to call my cousin.
You can stop, go get a drink of water, say hello to friends and go back to it 2 days later and it's still there. It doesn't go anywhere.
Mhm.
Someone once said to me that books and plays and so on are the greatest form of time machine ever invented, and that you are listening or thinking about or hearing in your head the words of someone who may have lived hundreds or thousands of years ago. And so that's like a time machine. You're actually hearing their thoughts in your mind's eye from a long time ago, but you're hearing it today.
Oh my God, yes. Yes.
It's true, isn't it?
It's totally true.
So, all right, you're a dialogue person. You're very good with dialogue. How do you make great dialogue?
It's dynamic.
What does that mean?
Imagine nobody says something. Dialogue is not a communication. Like I say, what time is it? And you say it's 4 o'clock. No. A dialogue is always a want and a desire under the lines. And it's a little bit of a skirmish. The good dialogue has a skirmish inside. There is subtext. There is a little duel going on. I say this and I say that. It's never, what time is it? That's not that.
And we teach that, by the way. I've taught screenwriting for more than a dozen years, and we teach that dialogue is not the unnecessary things. It's only what you have to express. So you're not coming in and saying, hello, hi, how are you? Nobody cares. You have to cut to the heart of it.
Exactly. And if it's magnificent if someone asks you something and you don't want to really respond, but you have to respond, magnificent. I mean, it's just all about the subtext.
Subtext. I'm glad you said that. It really is all about the subtext, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Is there something you do when you're writing a play or even dialogue in a novel? Is there something you do to find that subtext?
It should be driven by the characters. If I am struggling with the dialogue, then I didn't set it up right.
You're saying that the dialogue should flow easily for you.
Well, it has to create what it does in theater. It has to move forward the situation. You can't just have people talking about how they feel, as marvelous as that is.
But it has to move the storytelling forward.
Absolutely. There has to be a little movement. Of course, in a novel, it might not be a turning point, but there has to be movement.
Well, in a novel and in a movie or TV show, you can go to these many numerous locations. You can take someone in a novel anywhere, and you can do pretty much the same in a movie today, go anywhere. But in a play, usually, though you can express it so that you're going pretty much anywhere, usually most plays are in 1 set, 2 sets, 3 sets, tops. So you're a little bit more confined and you're a little bit more expansive with the conversation.
Yeah, that's why you have to create a situation that is compelling, so that the conversation is not a conversation, but is a little,
It's a little bit above normal, isn't it?
Yes, there is a tension.
Definitely got to be a tension.
You walk in and ask, where is Uncle Luigi? Uncle Luigi better be hiding somewhere and not wanting to be found.
Unless his last name is Godot.
Yeah, then, we're at the different business.
That's a different business entirely. So you have clearly been with Regal Publishing. Describe that process a little bit of working with a publisher. You approached them. What did you send them? An outline of your novel? Did you send them the whole novel? What did you do?
I remember that they had particular timelines when they accepted submissions, and I did that. I think they require 30 pages and in print.
In print.
So I went and I remember going actually to Office Max. I still have the memory, in the snow. And the guy asking me, what is this? I said, I wrote something. He said, well, isn't that wonderful? And I went, well, I don't know. But I remember it so vividly, because it did in a way wish me well. And then I sent it out, and then they said, yeah, send us the full thing.
And then how long did it take them to read it?
I don't think it was long. I remember that it wasn't too long, and then we had a conversation, which I think is very intelligent because, you want to know who is this person you're going to have a relationship with.
Mm-hmm.
Also, what connections in the business you have. I mean, do you have a group? Do you have a workshop? Do you have whatever the things that one asks? Why did you choose us? I mean, it's normal. You want to know each other.
Did they assign you to an editor?
Yeah, actually, the person who is in charge of Riga House was my editor. Yeah.
Okay. And this is a woman?
Yes.
And did she give you notes that you went back and had to do revisions?
No, not really. It was mostly notes about we use an adjective here or we lose an adverb there or interesting things, but not anything. I mean, I sent a very done novel. If I may recommend this, do not send stuff early. Don't get all excited.
Don't get all excited. Well, I think that that's truly important advice. So I've been having the most marvelous conversation with Rosanna Staffa for the last, not quite an hour at this point. We're going to wind the show down a little bit. And I'm wondering, in all of your experiences, can you share with us a story that's either weird, quirky, offbeat, strange, or just plain funny?
All of the above. At a certain point, I felt an affinity with a male character in my novel. And I wrote him like me. I started being him. I had a lot of fun with that. And a reader or two said, God, it's like I have met this character. I know this character. I will recognize him. And they're staring at me, in the face. And I go, great, You tell me if you do. It would be magnificent. And they're talking to the character.
And you infused yourself into that character.
Absolutely. My jokes, my quirks, it was me. Totally. Absolutely.
But changed the gender to male.
I mean, he originally was a guy, and I couldn't really relate to him. And I said, how about I make him me? And that was so fun and wonderful, and he became me.
So last question for you today, Rosanna. You've already told us, some wonderful tips and advice throughout this whole show. And you also just told us this fantastic piece of advice about not submitting work too early. I'm wondering if you can expand on that a little bit as to what do you think happens if you submit work too early?
Well, if you submit it too early, first and foremost, it probably doesn't have the chances that it could have if it was more mature. And it's better to wait and get more feedback. Get feedback, share with other writers. We all feel done, but also because we want to feel done, but make sure to let it sit and simmer for a second and then look at it again. Let it simmer, do something else. Have a fling with a short story or whatever you do, write the poem.
You're back to having another fling with a short story. You have a lot of flings.
Only we read the methods. And then, then go back. Go back with the fresher mind, more distant mind. I also recommend not to show it too soon to colleagues, because if it's too raw, then you start over-explaining.
So who do you show it to then, if not colleagues?
No, I don't mean while you're writing it. To do it with a very chosen group of writers.
I see. And so when you show it to colleagues, it's after it's really well polished.
Well, usually I do, but I did work on it in a workshop. But we were all in the same boat, so it was another thing. But if you show it to someone who has already written, who not part of this process, then you start over-explaining, and, you kind of...
Well, you can't sit there with the reader and explain things, so it has to all be there.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with a movie. You can't sit in the theater with the audience and explain why that's not there.
You turn around and go, wait a minute, yeah.
They go, well, I don't understand you. What happened to that character? Well, you can't explain it in the theater. It's either there or it isn't.
It would be a great scene, though. Someone standing up and going, and let me tell you.
That would be a good scene, a very good scene.
The writer going, you don't understand.
Rosanna Staffa, this has been an absolutely fantastic hour on StoryBeat, and I can't thank you enough for your time, your energy, and especially your wisdom. And for those who are interested, please go out and find The War Ends at 4 by Rosanna Staffa. Thank you so much, Rosanna.
This was fantastic. I thank you.
And so we've come to the end of today's StoryBeat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. StoryBeat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.